Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the HR Disruptor Summit 2022 virtual experience. I am Jan Barlow. I am the founder of the HR Disruptor Summit, and my wonderful guest today is Dr. Jerry Johnson. She is a facilitator for the in-person experience at the summit. And today's topic, of course, is going to be about the Alliances Amplified, bridging the academia and workforce gap. So welcome, everybody. If you could just type in the comments if you can hear us and see us. So we'd love to see where you're listening from or viewing from. Welcome, Jerry. Thank you so much, my friend, for coming on.
Good afternoon, Jan, and thank you for having me. Always an honor. Always an honor.
I'm so excited. Jerry and I, shout out to Catherine McCord for introducing us. Catherine is another fellow HR Disruptor Summit Peer Advisory Forum disruptor. So we welcome that introduction. And Dr. J, I love when we first started talking because you have been in the down and dirty on the front lines of academia for so many years, and with the kids first, and even having your own academic experiences, your experiences front line with not only students but your children, right? Your daughter.
Yes.
So you've been able to really come to the table with a multidimensional experience level. And when we started to talk about the gaps between academia and the workforce, really hit home, I think, especially with me talking to you about it, because you see the gap firsthand. So if you could just share a little bit about your background and with the audience, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. Dr. Jerry Johnson, I am a 20-plus year educator. Also was a nonprofit director at one point in time, now owning my own educational consulting company and doing some consulting for a couple of educational, let's say, organizations. So I also experienced being an adjunct as a professor. So I have seen everything from early childhood, birth, to adulthood in the field of education. So that's my background a bit.
So, Dr. J, when we talk about the gap, right, between academia and the workforce, I know from company standpoint in 2018, when Better Job Fit worked with a couple of the universities here in Dallas, and we worked with a couple of global companies to really dig down deep in what some of these issues were, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had found that the companies said, the three things that they wanted from college graduates was executive presence, experience, and leadership skills, right? And we had a chancellor from one of the universities ask the question, well, what about a degree? And one of the VPs of HR from a global company said, anybody can get a degree. So, we see this chasm between the two, and they both live in their little silos. It's just crazy. And, one of the biggest things, differentiators about the summit is, we're bridging those occupational and industry silos to bring people together, and especially for your in-person experience for the summit, you're bringing together academia, right? Career technical educators. These are the groups that we want to come and participate in the solution session and in our beta project. So we have academia, so career technical educators, career development officers, educational partnerships directors from nonprofits, right? So for your background, when you see what some of the challenges are, what have you seen on all three levels, not only your personal level, but from, when you think of your daughter's education, when you think of your position in leadership in academia, what are some of the things from all sorts of those levels have you seen that's a big gap?
I think that when we talk about the gap existing in education, for example, People don't realize that those types of programs cost money. The CTE programs, all of that costs money. And when you're dealing with districts that a large portion of their funding is from state funds, if you're talking about a district that's in an area that doesn't have a lot of property taxes, high property taxes, or a lot of businesses and things like that, these types of programs are definitely needed, but it stretches their budget, right? Even when you talk about colleges, as far as HBCUs versus predominantly white, universities and colleges, the funding is different. So when corporations or organizations say they want something from education, what are you putting into that is the question. The biggest gap that I see is this mindset of lack. In many instances of if I share my resources, or if I give this money, or what, I'm not going to get it back. Like, what am I getting back from that? Are we getting paid to do this? Things like that. The boards of organizations, nonprofits, school districts have a lot to do with the decision making as well in providing these types of programs or services or resources to each other. And then the amount of time that goes into it, because education, whether at the K-12 education level or the college and university level, is constantly, it's an ebb and flow. It's a constantly moving type thing with funding, finances, all of that, even implementation of programs, staffing, as we can see with the resignations, across the country and things like that. So the amount of time that an organization or corporation has to put into that partnership, in addition to the money that goes into that, which time might be money, to some people.
It is. Yeah.
But these are the three biggest things that I see, the gap in the thinking. But the mindset is the biggest barrier that I've seen to, we want this, but what are we putting into it? It's like any relationship, right? You want all this stuff from this other person, but what are you bringing to the table?
That's exactly right. That's right. Yeah. What are you willing to invest on your own?
There you go. Invest. It's not about buy-in anymore.
No.
For me, it's investment. Investment is long-term. Buy-in, you can return that. I can buy it one day and return it the next. But to me, it's an investment for everyone into our workforce of the future.
I love when you say that and you call the question. Again, mindset of lack. I can't tell you how many times over the last probably 12 years with Better Job Fit, working with veterans and foster care alumni, right, or other nonprofit organizations. And number one, to say, hey, let's partner to do this project, right, and collaborate. And that mindset of lack, or what do we got to give up? Not invest. What do we got to give up, right? Or we don't have enough. That becomes really the killer of any opportunity of change. Yes. That is the and that costs nothing, right? That's even out of the gate before $1 is spent.
Before a conversation is even had. A conversation can't even be had if you have that mindset,
I can't tell you how many opportunities that were put in front of me, right? Inspired action, met with people. Hey, this is a great idea. They introduced me to somebody. Let's put this program together. We don't even talk about money or anything. We can't even get the meeting date.
Right.
To talk, right? Because, after the first two sentences to make the meeting, hey, what do we want to talk about? Oh, well, they're already in that mindset of, no, we don't have the resources, or they'll want us to pay something. It doesn't cost anything to have a conversation to see what are the opportunities and how to come up with a solution for change, right?
Exactly. And God forbid you send an agenda ahead of time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you got me on that one. Yeah. Like, wow, have a vision beforehand, right? Let's just throw that in the flipping mix, right? You said something else also in the mix, right? Board members. When we talk about, again, having an open mind for collaboration, how about just take money off the table and just say nobody has, we don't want to talk about money. It's almost like having $5 in your pocket and going to the store and seeing and playing this little game about how many things can you buy with $5, right? So it's almost like we need a different mindset of, gosh, what happens if we come together, right? Still have an agenda of, this is the goal, to come together to create a new program, right? That'll serve the students, or, create win-win for everybody, not one way. Collaboration is about creating win-win. But you told me about like the board of directors, right? And a lot of times they don't even collaborate amongst themselves, right? I mean, sometimes, just my observation. I mean, from a young age, my mother, when I was in grade school, she was the president of the PTA. So at 8 years old, she used to come home from meetings and go, my God. So I knew this is not a problem that has just happened. This is age-old programming.
Yes.
So tell me more, when we talk about collaborating, because the summit this year is all about collaboration. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about the engagement session about bridging the gap between academia and the workforce. Doesn't matter what the topic is. It's based on collaboration. So when you think of perfect characteristics of a collaborative, because share a little bit, if you would, about the successful collaborations that you have facilitated when it comes to academia.
Well, one in particular that I really am kind of proud of in a way is still in existence today. There's an HBCU in St. Louis that was needing it's what they called a satellite kind of campus in an area of St. Louis where they had a lot of students coming from it. But their students weren't matriculating through. They weren't sustaining those students because of transportation barriers, to the main campus, which was downtown. And this area is in North County of St. Louis. So they needed a satellite, campus. Our organization had just restored a building that was in a school district. That was a school building that they had that we bought from them. We restored it, and then we needed someone to kind of, be the manager of this building, because we knew that we wanted other nonprofits to kind of work out of this building as, co-working space or classrooms or what have you. And so this HBCU, they were interested in being that hub manager because they wanted the location. Number one, they also wanted the partnership with that particular school district. And then they did not mind partnering with other nonprofits, for the co-working space and all of that. So they had classrooms on one floor of the building, and the other two floors were co-working spaces for other nonprofits that, they either partner with or just allow to use the space. And they still have that partnership with the high school as well. The school district that is the high school is right down the street. Nice. So those students could actually walk down the street if they wanted to do dual credit classes, or any of the events at what they call the education hub. And it's in a community that actually needed that. They didn't necessarily need a community center, but they needed more educational. They wanted more educational, programming. So that partnership is still in place today.
That's
and it was supposed to be a 5-year. And then they would be able to take over the building, if they wanted to buy the building from our organization or what have you. But what I will tell you what's funny about that partnership was that in the process, they went through 2 different presidents of the university. So once we started the deal, one president left, another one came in. And so I was the person, because I was the director of education, that had to keep up these relationships with the university to make sure that they were still on board, keep the plans going. So one thing that was very advantageous was the expertise of this group from this HBCU.
And what's an I'm sorry, what's an HCVU?
Historically Black College.
Oh, HBCU. Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
So the content, like expertise that they had as far as, what they wanted to see in the building, they had done background on the school district, what programs might be best to bring to that satellite location so it would be close for those students. All of that content expertise that they had was very, very helpful. The credibility that they had as a university with partnerships and all of that, because they had already started a lot of different partnerships with corporations and companies and things like that. The credibility that they already had with those organizations was very helpful in other nonprofits wanting to partner with them and actually be in the building. Also, another thing was the community involvement expansion. The expansion of the community involvement was fantastic for this particular neighborhood. Or this particular
city. Jerry, how did you get the community involved? Because it's one thing to have the school, and and who did you bring in to represent the community?
So the community that the school was in, it was one of the small cities in North County. I had to build a relationship with that mayor. I had to go to, a few of their city hall meetings to present our plan, who we were partnering with, what was going to be going on in this building, what access the community would have to it, what the partnerships were going to look like with the school district, all of those types of things I had to do. So I had to make sure that they were informed as to what is going on in your community, that these outside people are coming in and, we've renovated the building or restored the building and all this type of stuff, and we're bringing somebody else. So for them to be excited about who we were partnering with, excited about the programming that was going to come, things like that, we were taking care of. They were worried about security. They were worried about, can we use it for community events? Will we be able to, will we be allowed to use the space as well? Yes. There were certain things that we had to put in place, like different agreements that had to be drawn up. How would you go through choosing who gets to use this space first? All that type of stuff had to be discussed. So it was layers to this, right? Layers to it.
People just assume, because we're still thinking in flipping 16th century Newtonian, mindset of linear, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. It's multidimensional, and that it takes time to build those relationships, to bring them in on meetings, and like we talked about earlier, the whole element of 3D time and logistics of trying to get people together first and foremost is not easy.
No.
And then especially to talk about a new concept or a new topic that, change, right? It's like, well, and they're already going to be skeptical a little bit, right? So you really need people that have a vision. They understand strategic planning. They understand strategic visioning, right? That have those relationships that can facilitate collaboration, that can foster relationships, right? And it's not overnight. So tell me the reality of when that project started. Just give me an idea of a timeline, if you could. No, only because people don't understand the time and the financial resources, the emotional resources of what it takes to create relationshiping, because that's really what it is, right?
It is.
So what's that timeline?
Time intensive. Yeah. I would say we started out in the summer before the first president left, and then we did not get it done. It literally was probably a year and a half.
That's a labor of love.
Yeah, it was literally about a year and a half.
It's feeding relationships. It's again, you have fertile soil from the idea, right? Inspired action, inspired thought, getting people to come together to co-create this opportunity. But it's not overnight. I mean, and most people give up by that time, right?
Yes. And I think that the fact that we had coalitions of nonprofits meeting every month, and then the university was able to send representatives to talk about, the endeavor that they were, kind of partnering with us on, and they would come to the meetings. Like it was not only an investment on our part, it was an investment of time and money on their part as well. But they were excited about it. They knew what this could do, not only for the students, but for the college as well. That's another thing. Like I could not come to them and say, well, this is just about the students. I have to say how it's going to benefit them as well. So
everybody's got a benefit. I mean,
it's got to be, like you said, a win-win. It can't be, I'm just coming to you asking for this program just for the students. I got to show you how that's going to make you look, what you're going to get from this, whether it's a customer base, whether it's an employee, new employee base that you might get, or what have you, whether it's the community involvement that you might be looking for in a certain community. It has to be mutual wins on each side, and I think that helps with the mindset. If you are a person that looks at it that way, that helps with the mindset. But many times, everybody has their own agenda as to why they do certain things. You just have to, as a partnership person and as a collaboration person, you have to think about the big picture in all of these different, all of these different ways that we can invest and what we both can get out of it.
That is so true. And thank you, Lindy Chapman. Yeah, creating a win-win is critical. And again, it comes back to mindset, right? People get stuck in, oh, we've done it this way for however long and it can't change. Well, it won't change unless we change it, and unless we see that there's opportunity to change, right? We're open for change and nurturing those meetings monthly, right? Creating a relationship, bringing, people together to share ideas and co-creative, concepts.
Yes.
It's that investment of their creative energy, right? And connectional intelligence, right? What I always love to share is that definition of connectional intelligence is when you're working with someone or meeting with someone, doesn't matter whether it's for a second or third time or the first time, when you're truly engaged, there's a non-physical energy, right? That's present, that when you're really talking about change and innovation, all of a sudden you'll get a download, right? Of thought. And then you throw it out there, and then the other person gets a download of thought and they start to add. That's that 95% of non-physical connectional intelligence that is engaged and showing us what wants to be created, right? It's not woo-woo. It's when you bring those people together with new insight or open to consider new insight, to look at something differently, right? It creates a whole different fertile ground. I love, thank you, Lindsay. She says our post-COVID world makes it critical to change that mindset, but that's the way we've always done it. We have to be willing to innovate and think differently. Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Lindy. I mean, right? So when you started this process, right, in the, to pull people together just from an idea, right? What were some of the obstacles that you faced?
I think the biggest obstacle was the transition of staff. And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, it happens all the time in education, but for it to happen like it does in nonprofit,
Yeah.
it's rough. It's turnover too. And
Yeah.
also in,
Volunteers.
corporations
I
now
mean,
too. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think the biggest obstacle was the turnover in staff and maintaining those relationships. Even in all the partnerships that I've had to deal with grants and things like that, even in a partnership that had been there for years with our organization, they ended up having to rethink their particular grant because of the needs that were coming about in the community, right? So even if you have a partnership that's already in place and you all see that that partnership maybe needs to change a little bit before you end it, at least think about innovating and changing to align to what is needed at this point in time. Because some of our organizations actually, when they flip staff, it's not a bad thing. It's
Right.
not a bad thing. You just have to recreate that interest. You have to recreate that mission, that vision, or whatever with the new staff that's there. And they need to understand where you're going, because a lot of times deals can be crushed because of new staff, new CEO, new executive director, new superintendent coming in,
Yeah.
because they have a preconceived notion about what this partnership actually is, rather than having the conversation, sitting down, looking at the data. What has this partnership brought? What is it not brought? And even if it hasn't brought what you need moving forward, ask them, can they do that?
Right.
Or can they partner with someone that can help them to do that? I think we nix a lot of good partnerships or collaborations based on preconceived notions, and then also just ignorance, not knowing what actually is going on with that partnership and how they can actually benefit us. If it's a long-term partnership, obviously they want to be there. So give them a chance. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
like you said, ask first of all, but
Right.
it's the same way. I mean, the program that we had with Better Job Fit in a local nonprofit, somebody new came in and said, "Oh, we're not going to do it anymore."
Right.
I mean, we've been a partner for 6 years. Like what? What? Like, can we talk about it? Like, what are your thoughts? Like, we didn't even get a chance to even talk about it, and so
Right. There
I
you
just
go.
thought, like, wow, all the time and resources spent to create relationship. We had a successful collaboration, and just willy-nilly somebody wakes up one day and says we're not going to do it. I mean, that's life, we know that, but I think we need to be more mindful before we make those decisions, right?
Mhm.
Because there is a lot at stake on so many levels, instead of just looking maybe at the surface and saying, oh, maybe the program wasn't as successful this year as it was last year. Well, how about digging in a little deeper and start asking questions about why? Like,
Right.
what could have it been, right? I mean, since COVID, I mean, anybody making a decision since COVID, that's I mean, I don't know how anybody can make a decision, because human behavior has changed. Everything, life has changed since then, right? So
It absolutely
we
has.
need to be more creative now more than ever, I think.
Yes.
Um,
And going back to that, had the new president come in and not been informed about, the relationships that we still had, what the project, where the project was, all of that, and the interest that was already there. And also had the new president not met with me, you know what I'm saying,
yeah,
and not
yeah,
heard exactly what we've been doing up to that point, because the work didn't stop because we were waiting on a new president to come in. I was still working on, the different layouts of the building,
yeah.
how everything was going to flow, move, how we could use it, all of that. So all I'm saying is, in a transition of, staff or funds or what have you, just try to think outside of the box, because these partnerships and these collaborations, people need them. People
Right.
need the services and the things that you are trying to provide. So think outside of everything else that is going on at the big picture. What is the mission, vision? What are we trying to provide? What service are we trying to give? These people need that. They need them.
That's right. And it's not just about the ego of the person coming into the new position, right? I mean, that where most of the time it gets lost, right? Well, I'm excited. First of all, thank you again for being part of our virtual experience and a facilitator for the in-person experience.
I cannot wait.
I
Anybody
mean,
coming to my lab, to my session, you're going to have fun.
I mean, we're going to be sharing some tidbits of that between now and the in-person summit, and very excited again for your beta project, right? And for your lab and your engagement session. We want general public. We want people who are involved or have been affected with the gap between academia and the workforce. We want to invite career development partners. We want to invite career technical educators, people from what levels? Academia,
Any education nonprofits that
Yep.
deal with education, any corporations that currently or would like to partner with any academic, organization. And then also if you are in student support services in the school district, this might help you as well, because you might be doing partnerships and collaborations and bringing those grants and things in for school districts too.
I love it. And we're going to have a little disclaimer here. Be prepared to roll up your sleeves and co-create, because that's really what the summit is all about. This venue is about recreating or really reimagine work. Everything about work, everything what we think about, it's really about reimagine life, because there's no
Right.
now between work and life. So Jerry, thank you again, my friend, and just look forward to your in-person session. And stand by, everybody. We're going to transition to our next virtual experience with Lindy Chapman. But Dr. Johnson, thank you so much. Take care.